one too. I'm going to use the one. Well, so you guys feel like you had to call 1-800-NOAH to get to church today? Huh? Everybody swam to church? Huh? We needed that rain, didn't we? Oh my goodness. We need this rain really, really bad. I remember when I first moved down here 10 years ago. I remember the first summer, of course, the first winter I was here, there was no snow and it never got below 40 degrees. Boy, you tricked me. And because every winter's different, isn't it? I found out every winter is different here. But I remember walking out and seeing the ground cracked, and I'm like, what is going on here? We haven't, because you get so dry in the middle of the summer, and then there's no water, and then all of a sudden there's water, and then there's floods, and this is lots of fun. It's fun to live here. Anyway, I'm trying to talk Steve into coming down here. I'm just trying to talk. Brother Steve, if you haven't met him, but he come down a couple weeks ago with his wife, and we're talking about trying to get him to move down here within the next year. He needs to. See, just tell him that. You guys get to know Brother Steve. He's some of you that didn't meet him last week. We've been around for each other for a long time. I remember when Ryan was born, Steve and Kara, his wife Kara, they came, got us from the hospital and took us to the house, and they've known us, watched our kids grow up. I watched his kids grow up, and we've gotten into a lot of stuff together. And so Brother Steve's praying about moving down here maybe within the next year, and helping us out down with our school and different things that we have plans to grow and do things here in this ministry. So you guys get to know him, get to meet him, talk to him. If you don't like him, just tell me you don't like him. It's all right. But we have been accused of being brothers before. So we think a lot alike. He's the best friend I have in the world. We fight like brothers, and we do. Just theologically, we cross swords on anything. He questions everything I say, and everything he says is wrong. So Steve, you understand that, right? His name's Steve too, so you have to get to know him. You'll have fun with him, okay? But I said a couple weeks ago, I've got several books he wrote that's on my library shelf, and vice versa. We've go back a ways, done a lot of things. I'm hoping, I'm really praying, excited. I just put all the cards on the table. I want him to move down here and help us out down here. Be so happy. We'll get our wheelchairs out and race wheelchairs and all that kind of stuff and just die here together, right? Right? So anyway, so you get to know him, okay, and see what you see if you come to love him like I do. I want you to go to 1 Timothy is where we're going to start. The Messenger's personal character building. We've been talking about reaching your community for Christ, and how important that is. And this is section D on what we call the Messenger's personal character building. And building ourselves is so important. There's a verse in the Bible that says, if the footmen tire you, what of the horsemen? And I've noticed something. I've noticed that people that serve the Lord oftentimes get weighed down heavily with responsibility and care. And if you would go to, like, for example, the disciples in the New Testament, where the feeding of the 5,000, remember the story of the feeding of the 5,000? Remember that? If you look at what goes on around there, you'll find, like, they come back. They've just come back from going out and healing the sick and casting out demons, and then they hear that John was beheaded. John the Baptist, their hero, was beheaded. They come back to Jesus and say, John was beheaded, and we cast out demons. And they have this whole conflict of emotions because they had victory, and then how come John is beheaded? I mean, he was a forerunner to the Messiah. Isn't he like number one guy in the kingdom? I mean, come on, what's going on? And Jesus said, well, he listens to them, and he said, rejoice at your names written down. And then all of a sudden, thousands of people show up, and Jesus starts teaching them. So they're like, okay, we'll finish this conversation later. We got to do all this. And 5,000 people out there, men at least, and women and children. I don't know how many, probably a lot more, 10, 12, 15,000 people. Who knows total. But at least 5,000 men. And they're sitting there listening to Jesus, and Jesus gets the middle of the day, and Jesus says, you know, these guys have been listening to me teach all day. They're probably getting hungry. Don't you wish your preacher would think that? Well, let's order some pizza, you know? And he's like, what are we going to do here? And the disciples are like, why are you asking? We're your disciples. You don't pay us. How do we get food? And we don't know. And Jesus said, well, what do you got? And I'm trying to think. Andrew comes to Jesus and says, well, we got this little boy that's got 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Jesus said, well, that'll be all right. Bring that. Let's see. Like, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, 5,000 people count. Anybody do the math? What is this, new math? What are we doing? And so Jesus takes the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, breaks it up, and says, now give it to all the people. And they're like, we're tired, you know? And they distribute this food to 5,000 people. And then when they're done, there's 12 baskets of fragments. Now, there's been a lot of talk about those 12 baskets. Well, this little boy's got 12 baskets. My personal opinion is I've been around these feeding frenzies, and it's usually 12 baskets of garbage is what it is, left over. That's really what it is. So these guys are out cleaning up the mess, and here's fragments of this, and there's 12 fragments, 12 baskets full of leftovers. I'm like, what are we going to do this? Take it to the homeless shelter? You know, what are we going to do? And they take these baskets. I really don't know what they did with them, but they cleaned up their place. They were left with that. See, they're already wore out, and now they're 5,000 people, and they're cleaning up the mess. And Jesus takes them down to the water's edge, and the Bible uses this phrase. It says he constrained him to get on the boat. Constrained him. He said, you get out of here. I'll send the people away. You guys leave. Because they were in ministry. They were doing things for the Lord. They were reaching the lost, doing all these things, trying to help these folks. And they couldn't handle it, you know. So he said, you need a rest. I've noticed that. No matter what you're doing for the Lord, there are times when it's not unspiritual for you to say, pause button, I need a break. Right? That's not unspiritual. Sometimes you can't people. Right? Make sense? You know that. You know what I'm talking about. We just talked about it a minute ago. You can't, I can't people anymore. And Jesus says, okay, get on a boat, go away, take a break. You know, it's kind of funny. I saw this advertisement for Hertz cars. Have anybody seen that lately? With who's that quarterback that everybody thinks is all that? Huh? What's the quarterback? Tom Brady. Yeah. So Tom Brady retires, right? I don't know if you guys heard of him. He's this great big. Anybody follow football? So Tom Brady, and everybody's like, oh, they call him the GOAT. GOAT means greatest of all time. I'm like, really nice name. And I think King would be a better acronym, but anyway, GOAT. And so they say he's the greatest quarterback of all time. He's won all these things and stuff. And I'm like, I don't really care about that. Peyton Manning was better than him. So anyway, you don't think Peyton Manning was better than him? Just out. Right now. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I know. I'm from Indiana. So anyway, this commercial, Tom Brady's standing there, and he's like, wait, I didn't need to retire. You seen it? All I needed was a vacation. I just needed a vacation. I want to tell you something. That's sometimes what people need, just a break. But my point in all of this, talking about all this, is when you're reaching the lost and when you are on the front lines trying to help people make the changes in their lives, a lot of times you are in over your head all the time. You think about it. So here's a person that is headed for hell, eternally going to be eternal, what I believe, eternal damnation. I believe that they're headed that way if they're lost. Okay? So this person whose eternal destination is set one way, eternal, okay? You are at the crossroads changing their direction. We'll talk about that in church in a little bit. They're changing their direction, and they're going now to heaven. Do you think that's just an easy switch? I mean, you think the devil's just going to sit down and say, oh, that's cool. Oh, you don't want to ride my train anymore? All right. I mean, he's really coming after you. And he's going to use everything in his power to stop you from being effective. Everything he can do. If you read the book of Job, you'll find out that they don't play fair. He doesn't play fair. We have these in the Revolutionary War. When the British came over to America, the British were it was a well-oiled machine, one of the best armies in the world at the time. In fact, Britain had taken over so many lands that they just thought America was just another one of their easy takes. And when they came over here, they were like, lined up in rows, and this is how you do a war. You line up in rows, and you fire, then you set back, and the next guy's very disciplined, well-oiled machine. And the Americans were like, they learned from the Indians how to hide behind trees and, snipers. I don't know if you've seen the movie American Sniper, but that's a whole American thing. We're gonna, and it comes from the American Indians. And so we're gonna hide out in the tree. You can't hit me, but I'm just gonna pick you guys off. And the British soldiers are like, it demoralized them. They're like, this isn't even fair. They aren't fighting fair. We found the same thing to be true with the like Al Qaeda and some of them. They're coming in. Well, that's not fair. You get in a civilian airplane and run it into the side of the world. That's not fair. But I want you to understand, that's how the devil fights. Think about it. I just compared Americans to Al Qaeda. That wasn't a great comparison, but I'm just telling you that's what we're talking about. We're talking about not fighting fair. The devil does not fight fair. He will use anything in his bag of tricks to destroy you. Now, when you're trying to get somebody to change direction from the devil's team to God's team, put it lightly, it's a big deal. So that's why when you get into the front lines, you have to be prepared ahead of time. Right? You have to be prepared. You have to be ready and strong enough to be able to handle it. If you go off half-cocked, you're like, I'm just going to go out there, I'm going to charge the devil with a squirt gun. And guess what? That's not enough. You have to be strong and be able to handle the pressures. And so that's what we're talking about. This is our fourth lesson in that series, and we're going to talk about these things that Paul told Timothy. Personal responsibility is necessary for solid ministry. God does not run a spiritual lottery. What I mean by that is you get a ticket and maybe you're the right one and maybe you're not. God didn't say, let's see how I'm feeling today. I'm going to just kind of roll the dice and pick one of you guys, and one of you guys are going to be the next whatever. That's not how it works. Huh? What happens is godliness comes by taking heed to yourself. It comes by hard work, by doing the homework, by doing the things you're supposed to do. That's what is required. Does that make sense? Okay, so what are the things Paul tells Timothy? 1 Timothy 3, verse 15. And I went through Timothy and Titus because 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, these are called pastoral epistles. Titus was a young pastor that Paul was teaching, and Timothy was a young pastor Paul was teaching. And I found these phrases in through these letters, and they're always accompanied with, this is something you do, thyself. Pay attention to yourself, right? They call it self-care or whatever. Thyself. So these are the things we're going to talk about. First one is in chapter 3, verse 15. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to, here it is, I circled this, behave thyself. in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. You got to learn how to behave yourself. How do you interact with others in the church? It's an important thing to learn. Churches, churches are a dime a dozen. We looked up in this area. Christy did the hard work a year ago. I don't know how long it's been, but a few months back. And she found 99 churches in our area. And she cataloged all of them, and we have that resource. Well, I didn't tell you this, Christy, but Sarah Bush Hospital now has that list. That's their list because it's up to date. They asked me if I had any. And then Wingman Ministries also has it. That you should have copyrighted that or something. All that work you put into that. But there's several other ministries are using the work that she did, putting together. That was a lot of work, wasn't it? Putting together all the churches and calling them and getting up-to-date phone numbers. And but anyway, 90, Steve, you don't understand the value of that kind of a list, don't you? 99 churches that we have collected. That's a lot of churches. And they all have different kinds of shapes and sizes and styles, and some of the things they do, we're thinking, you guys shouldn't do that. But it's not our business, is it? But we have to learn how to interact because there's different styles of churches. We have to learn how to interact with them. And if we don't learn how to interact with them, we're not going to reach lost people because lost people look at church. Oh, you guys just fight amongst yourself. We don't understand what's going on, right? Someone asked me the other day, how do you pick the religion that you go to? That was a question. You could tell they're not familiar with church lingo. How do you pick the religion? You know, there's the Catholic, there's the Mormon. How do you pick it? Which one do I know to commit myself to? That's a good question. And we have to learn how to interact amongst different people and different styles, right? We have to learn how to interact within a local body. Romans 14 tells us there are some things, let each be convinced in his own mind. There's some stuff you just got to be convinced in your own mind about, and you got to realize that this person and this person and this person are convinced in their own minds about different things. And some of that stuff is really completely, who cares? I hope I'm not going to step on anybody's toes here, but one big example that Romans 14 talks about is herbs. Okay? Now I'm going to tell you, there are multiple ways to health. Some people will treat cancer with everything the doctor says, like chemotherapy and radiation, whatever the doctor says, whatever is the current medical. Some people will say, I'm going to Mexico because there's some of these little pills down there, and if you take 50 of them a day, it's going to fix it. And some people say, well, that's not FDA approved. Well, we all know FDA is not the God, We understand, we've all learned WHO and the CDC are not God. We've all learned that recently, haven't we? Some people still haven't figured it out. But anyway, you come in church, people come into church and I got to wear a mask. And someone else says, why are you wearing a mask? Somebody will say, COVID's no good. COVID's just a farce. Well, Steve can tell you, he had COVID really bad, almost died from it. And that's another story. But there's some people that get COVID, and then it'll take them out. And some people don't get it, and it's just an allergy reaction, And so you have all these opinions. Someone was coming to our church the other day, and they told me that they thought that I was going to teach everybody they should take the vaccine. Well, I'm not going to do that. If you take the vaccine, that's up to you. If you don't take the vaccine, that's also up to you. I believe in freedom. Okay? I believe you have freedom of choice. You know where I get that? Romans 14. Let each be convinced in their own mind. All right? So if you feel like wearing a mask and getting the vaccine will protect you and yours, and you want to do that, that's okay. If you think that wearing a mask is stupid and you'd rather breathe oxygen, pure oxygen instead of through the chemically induced or chemically, you get what I'm saying. I have to wear those at the hospital all the time, and they smell bad, and I can't stand them. But I have to wear them anyway when I go into the hospital. They want me to get a vaccine. I didn't get one for a lot of reasons. I have other vaccines. I have every vaccine you can imagine because I've traveled around the world and stuff in different places. And I've had to get all these vaccines to travel overseas in Africa and stuff. And so, but I'm just going to tell you, I haven't got the COVID vaccine, but some of you have. Who cares? We have to learn how to function. You see, know how to behave thyself in the church of God. We have to figure out how to accept people's differences and love them anyway. Right? That's one of the things that's really important. Church is volunteers. You have to learn how to serve alongside others who volunteer. Well, I'm the volunteer today. Nobody else. Yeah, that's the way it is. That's what it is with volunteers. Well, this job has to get done, and I'm the only volunteer. Well, God bless you. Amen. I'm glad you're here. You know? So this room ought to be full in Sunday school. Well, I get it. I get it. It's not. Why? Because everybody's volunteering. Right? Volunteering time. They're coming because it's okay. We have to learn. You have to learn how to behave yourself. I talk about varied, volunteer, and victorious. This is another word I wanted you to see. The church is victorious, so we must learn to be gracious. One of the things that I see a lot of times in the church that distresses me is people are teaching Christians to be king's kids and act like spoiled, rotten jerks. And look, let's understand something. I hope Kamala Harris becomes a Christian. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't believe she is one. Pardon me for judging, but I don't think Kamala Harris is a Christian. If she is, I'm not seeing any signs of it. Forgive me for judging. My point is this. I know Christians that get completely crossways about this and start calling her names and putting pictures of her face beside a donkey or a camel or something. Totally disrespectful. When you stand before the throne of God, just think about it for a minute. If she's lost and she gets thrown into hell forever, how you going to feel when all you've been doing is posting memes of her with a camel's face? You know what I'm saying? You're going to win. You're victorious. You're a Christian. How do you be gracious to people who aren't? Does that mean you have to learn how to do? Learn how to behave thyself. You're victorious. You know what I've noticed? I've noticed that people that really have done something, really are something, don't have to brag about it all the time. I used to say this about people in the war. You could tell a soldier that had not seen much action because, boy, his stories were colorful. The ones that had seen all the action were just quiet and let somebody else talk. Have you noticed that? The same is true, for people will they'll tell a story and they'll talk about all these things, and boy, you're just like, boy, can't wait to get away from it because here comes another story. You know what I'm talking about, Howard. It's true, isn't it? And so what I'm trying to tell you is this. People that have experience, people that have actually seen the elephant and been somewhere and done something, they don't always have to prop themselves up and build themselves up. They're not trying to prove something, right? Can I say that's the way you ought to be? You're a winner. You don't have to publish a book on winning. Learn how to be gracious to people who are not winning and give them the hand up, help them to become winners. That's kind of what we're looking for. Boy, that's a whole sermon right there in point number 1, isn't it? I don't know if we're going to get through this list today. Let's go to the second one. 1 Timothy 4:7. But refuse profane and old wives' fables. What are we talking about? That's what they used to call them, old wives' fables. They were stories and things that weren't valid true stories and really didn't have any foundation in truth. But they were stories that were. Some cultures are matriarchal, like in Mexico, you'll find that it's a matriarchal culture. You'll find that the black communities are matriarchal. Mom's, grandma, she's whatever she says goes. While if she tells you that if you're going to get rid of a wart by cutting a potato in half and burying it on the full moon, that's something they will do. That's an old wives' fable. Okay, things like that. They're just like, this is the way you do it. Cotton liver oil, baby doll. He said, don't get caught. So don't get caught wrapped up in all of that, right? But rather, he said, exercise thyself rather unto godliness. For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having the promise of life that now is, and of that which is to come. I think you can get some learning from older folks, but there are some people dispensing wisdom that ought to just be quiet. I've heard some of it, but just better off just not to say those things. Exercise unto godliness. Developing yourself spiritually is your responsibility. Learn how to increase your capacity for godliness. I've seen a lot of you folks grow. I know your stories, and one of the reasons I love this church so much is all of the stories that come here. I love hearing everybody's stories and where they come from in the background. And I've noticed over time, as the Word of God, if you let the Word of God fill your heart and mind, I've noticed you guys people just growing spiritually. I've seen it happen, and that thrills me. That's why I do what I do. Why I keep doing it. Why I don't quit yet. Haven't quit yet. But the reason is that I see you developing yourself, and you have a bigger capacity for understanding God. I was just telling Steve this morning about your little girl. How she was thinking I was Jesus. She would say she thought I was Jesus. Well, she's going to reach a point where she's going to realize I'm Jesus. He ain't Jesus. I'm keeping her away from my wife right now for that reason. My wife will tell he ain't Jesus. Now we know Howard's an angel, but other than that, right? But what's neat is when you see those little kids, and Steve was telling me his little boy Levi used to call me church. That's what he thought. He thought, hey, gonna go see church. He was talking about me. Little kids that way, that's what they. But then as they grow, you see that they learn. Oh, they can't get away from mom and dad, and then they're in Sunday school class, and they're learning about all these things. I remember the boy this last year in school. He came up to me and he said, it was Cameron. He was your nephew, right? And he came for a little while. And he came to me. He says, boys, I've been learning about Nebuchadnezzar. He could even pronounce it. And he said, I've never heard of Nebuchadnezzar before. I didn't know anybody. He said, I'm learning. He says, this is really cool learning all these things out of the Bible. It's really, really cool. And he enjoyed that. He liked that. And he's like, I'm seeing his capacity grow. How does that happen? It happens by continually immersing yourself in the gospel, in the Bible terms, Bible words, right? And your capacity grows. We talk about the King James issue and things like that. A lot of folks will tell you that the King James is hard to understand. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of books I've read that were hard to understand. A lot of books. But if I was interested in the subject, I would acquaint myself with the words being used. And I would grow my understanding, exercise my ability, increase my capacity. Does that make sense? And suddenly I get more and more and more words. And I have more and more understanding of a vocabulary that I'm looking for. Exercise thyself. Push yourself. You guys know I've been reading the Ante-Nicene Fathers. I'll be honest with you. There was a time in my life when I had no idea what Nicene meant. You guys are getting the idea what Nicene is because you hear me talking about it. You probably are the same. I had no idea. Ante-Nicene, what's that? You know? Well, you say, well, that's an old archaic word. Have you ever heard of antebellum? Anybody heard of antebellum? How many of you heard of that? How do you know the word antebellum? It's a country singer, right? And antebellum. And so I think they call her Lady A now. She's changed it. But antebellum means no war, without war, or pre-war. Okay, no war. That's her shtick was peace, love, no war, kind of thing. That's what antebellum means. Okay, so that's in our culture. Yeah, it's archaic, but here's a popular music person. She's got this name, and so how do I know what she's about? Well, I went and looked it up, and I didn't know what ante meant. Ante-Nicene meant before. In that case, meant before the Nicene Council. What was the Nicene Council? Well, I'm going to read it. Then I got these volumes. I got 10 volumes. I'm like, I'm going to read through these things. And I open up volume 1, and I'm telling you, it took me a year to read it. And I read stuff fast. But I can't read that fast. I'm introduced with these concepts that I've never heard of before. I didn't know what they were talking about. But you know what? I wanted to learn it. And so I increased my capacity. It's called exercising. Open up a commentary. Want to learn more about this? Well, I don't know these languages. I don't know what they're talking about. I look at that and it's Greek. I don't know what it is. You know, Greek to me. You've heard that phrase? And little by little, increase my capacity, increase my understanding, read more, understand more. Does that make sense? So he's saying, exercise yourself unto godliness. Exercise. Okay? Develop yourself. Okay, let's go to the next one, verse 15 of chapter 4. Meditate upon these things, give thyself wholly to them, that thy profiting may appear to all. Give thyself, making the gospel center to who you are, will change your life. Here's the thing. How do I say this? Steve, we were talking about this yesterday with the youth conference. You said to me, whenever your boys would go to these youth conferences, that afterwards they would come back, they'd be more interested in their Bible. And, what does the Bible say? And they would read it more. I've seen this with youth camp. When you send kids to teen camp, they'll make decisions and they'll come back and they're like, oh, they get it. And they're more interested in God. And you'll see that change who they are, and it'll shape them, make them better. And so that's one of the reasons why we do youth conferences and teen camps and that kind of thing, to try to help the kids direct that way. What happens basically at a teen camp, and I've been around teen camps my whole life. Well, in the last few years, I haven't done much with it. Basically, my kids are out of teen camp, so I've not been around it as much. But we are working towards those goals still in our church, so that we will have more teen camp opportunities in our church. And one of the things Steve and I have been talking about, if he could come down to help us with some of that, youth conferences and those kinds of things. One of the things that I noticed, I was on the board for 12 years at a camp in South Georgia, and would preach 2 weeks. And we would see every year is the same thing. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're just trying to wear those suckers out. You're wearing them down, just wearing them down. Just run, crazy, everything. And by Thursday, everybody is exhausted. And every Thursday night, after a steady barrage, we'd have preaching 3 times a day, playing all the rest of the time, eating roasted goat, and sometimes they would offer you barbecue snake meat. Yes. South Georgia. Yes. Barbecue, rattlesnake and water moccasin. By the roasted goat was amazing. I'm not gonna lie. It was really amazing. The other I could do without it. But the by Thursday, every Thursday, it was like all of the kids were like crying at the altar, asking God to fix the brokenness. And on Friday, every year, Friday was like this mountaintop spiritual experience where kids had been saved through the week, a whole change in attitude and direction and focus. It was amazing to watch. Happened the same every year. Different groups of kids. Why? Because nobody could have cell phones. Nobody had outside influence. It was all Bible, 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 Bible. Wholly centered. All of the leaders, we had some, cool teachers and preachers that had done things, and they were there, and everyone was accessible to the kids. The kids would come and play with us and talk to us, and we'd preach at them and then play with them, and it was all of that. I mean, we had a guy that, he was like a baseball guy, and different people that the kids were like, wow, and what happened was, because and this happens, I was noticing Dayspring had just finished up their teen camp this week, and they had that kind of experience there too. It's like, what happens is these kids, you give them wholly to God that week. Oh, a lot of fun, a lot of playing, wear yourself out physically, but your mind and heart is centered only on God. It's just hammer, 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 hammer. By the end of the week, they're like on this spiritual high. You get what I'm saying? Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed Christians that will give themselves wholly to God. They'll put church as a priority, and they'll get there every chance they can. They put that as a priority. It's like, this is what we're gonna do. We're fully immersed. I think, Heather, you said something about that on Facebook the other day. I appreciate your post. It was really sweet, and it meant a lot to me, about your family you found here. And you said something about how you've immersed yourself in the culture here. And that you can see when you do that, you give yourself wholly to God, what a change it makes in your family, right? Is that right? You've seen it happen, right? And I'm telling you, when you give yourself wholly, Brother Steve, to God, wholly, completely, everything about what you're doing is for God. Everything you do. We have a go-kart track. And Zach and I, when we started this, when he was 19, part of it's keep him out of jail. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Not really. gave him something to do, And we were working on building that thing, and now he's married and stuff. And so, that goal with that go-kart track has not been just to build a go-kart track. It's been to be able to interact with people in the community and have an effect for God in a different avenue, in a different way. Does that make sense? I remember I was at the mall one day. It was on a Thursday or something, and somebody saw me there that didn't like me. I know, there's one or two people in the world that don't, and this guy, he doesn't like me at all. He does not like me. He came for a while, and then, I don't know, he's always mad about something. And so he saw me in the mall, and actually, he tripped over the carpet, and I reached to help him, and he didn't want my help. And he looked at me and said, "I thought your day off was Friday. You're here on Thursday at the mall hawking stuff for the go-kart track. That's not your day. This isn't your day off. You should be back in your office." I'm like, well, thank you for that advice and counsel. I mean, I'm like, what? That was my first reaction. What are you talking about? And I thought afterwards, I've thought about that a lot. I think, I'm out here meeting people, talking about God. Everybody knows I'm a pastor. I'm in the mall meeting people, using my go-kart track as a way to conversate with people. Is that a word? Conversate? So that was what I was doing because I found out that the best way for me to live my life is to give myself wholly to God, so everything I do is some way connected and interacted with Him in that regard. Does that make sense? I want to tell you something. When you find yourself giving yourself wholly to God, you'll find that everything you do has the smell of heaven on it. I love Milk and Honey down here, that coffee shop. You go in there and they have on their T-shirts trying to make heaven crowded. Oh, with a coffee shop, right? Isn't that great? That's knowing how to behave yourself. That's giving yourself wholly to God and His ministry. Does it make sense? Putting your shoulder to the work, doing whatever is necessary, carrying out trash if you have to. Whatever you do for God and His glory, okay? The fourth thing, 1 Timothy 4:16, and this is, we're going to stop here today. We'll finish up the last 8 next week, okay? So hang on to these sheets for next week. Verse 16, 1 Timothy 4, verse 16 says, "Take heed unto thyself and to the doctrine. Continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee." A friend of mine, he's now a missionary in Papua New Guinea. He was in the military for years and years, and his name is John Allen. Some of you might have met John Allen. Fun fact for you. Steve, I'm trying to think of his name, passed away recently. The one that put up the Grant, Ulysses S. Grant monuments here in Mattoon, a historian, Thompson. Steve Thompson and John Allen were military buddies, and they served over on the German lines together for years and years. They were in infantry together. And so I brought John here to meet Steve, and they talked about the Lord. And John tried to reach Steve Thompson for Christ before, and Steve came to church to hear him. He came here to visit, came to church to hear him. You know them, right? They're friends of yours. So I'm hoping that Steve made his peace with Christ. I'm hoping he did. But now, why was I saying all that? Hang on. It'll come back. What was that? John Allen. Okay, so John was in the military for a while and a long time, and he preached a message one day that I've never forgotten about the tomb of the unknown soldier. How many of you guys are familiar with what goes on there? Unbelievable what those soldiers do. Now, this is John's story. John's been down there. There is a room that those guys come through. You guys heard of that? I believe, I don't remember this, I'm not sure, I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe some of you guys will know the facts. But he told me, I believe those guys have to check themselves in a mirror like 8 times. Is that right? Does that sound right? Like 8 times. They have 8 mirrors that before they get out to the public, they have to check themselves. Everything. Look at, just make sure that they are completely presentable before they step out to honor the unknown soldiers. Why? Check yourself. Take heed to thyself. It is one of the most moving military presentations in the world, 24 hours a day, has been continual. And those guys that do that are a part of they're part of an elite group. You know what I'm saying? And they have to, that's one of the rules. Take heed to yourself. Check yourself, because people are watching you. It's something you're visible. They're looking at you. They're seeing how you do things. I think it would shock you if you knew how many people actually watched you. I don't think about it. Honestly, it freaked me out. I don't think about what people think about me. I don't think about it. I was going home from church the other day, and I drive through. You think my house is on the south end of town. So when I'm on my motorcycle in a suit and tie on Sunday morning, it's kind of a spectacle. I don't really think about it. I'm in a suit and tie, big deal. On a motorcycle, big deal. Drive through town. So I'm in the hospital the other day. Somebody said, "Hey, I saw you Sunday." Was I picking my nose? What? What? No, we were on a motorcycle. My husband and I were on a motorcycle, and we passed, and she said, "I told him, I think that's Pastor Dan. I think that's him." I'm like, "Wow, I was just going home." You know? I walked out to I'm a fire chaplain, so there was a car on fire over here, not far from here, and I went out to the scene, and I'm walking up, talking to the firemen and stuff, and a bunch of people are sitting along the sidewalk, and I saw them in their chairs watching the fire. I was like, that sounds like me and my wife. We'd have ice cream and watch a fire. That sounds like fun. And so I said something to one of the firemen. Someone come over and got me, and they were sitting there talking. "Is that Dan Hafley? Hey, that's Dan Hafley." I'm like, "What? I don't know who you guys are. You're freaking me out." You know what I'm saying? People do that to you all the time. You don't even know. They're watching you. They're watching what you do, how you do it, how you behave. I knew this one preacher that had a secret problem with alcohol. So he would sneak into other towns where his wife wasn't, where they didn't know him, and he'd buy alcohol at a bar. Somebody saw him. "Hey, what you doing in here, preacher?" Nice. You see, you need to watch yourself. Take heed to yourself. People are watching you. They're thinking about your life. They're trying to make, some of them, you don't even realize, relatives are trying to make a decision about what they're going to do based on how successful they see your life, what they see about you. He said, give heed to the doctrine. Doctrine is pure truth. Pay attention to the truth. Stay true. Stop lying. Don't fake anybody out. Right? Take heed to yourself and under the doctrine. Continue in them. For doing this, thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. I've told Ryan, Tristan, Zach, I've told them over and over again, if what you're preaching doesn't work for you, shut up. What you believe has to work in your life. If it doesn't work in your life, it's not going to work in anyone else's. Right? So when you're looking for truth and you're looking for change and you're looking for positive things, take heed to that. It's important for you to take heed to yourself. Take care of yourself. All right? All right. We'll take a break.